It is 1 o'clock, and I am super enthusiastic to be here. I'm Michael Santos. I think I recognize a lot of names there. I see Rhonda I've seen for a long time, haven't seen for a long time, and Nicholas Kaiser and other members of our team. So I think the typical plan is that people hang around for a while. We wait around for a little while for somebody else to start. Is that right, Melinda or Scotty or Joseph?
You got it.
Okay, great, great. Well, we could use this time instead of wasting this time. We could use this time. If anybody has any questions, I'm very happy to respond to those questions to the best of my ability.
I have a question.
Okay.
It's been not quite 3 years since I read your book, Earning Freedom. It meant so much to me. I can't remember when you were first incarcerated, were you immediately gung-ho and you knew how to straighten this out, or did it take you a while? Did you make some mistakes? Did you have some issues, or did you just jump right in and start doing what you were supposed to do?
I was really fortunate, Rhonda, and I know it's not the same for everybody, but I was very fortunate because I spent my first year in solitary confinement, and I didn't know. I thought that's what prison was like, solitary confinement. I'd never been incarcerated before, and it was the start of the war on drugs. And I got arrested, and they put me in solitary pretty much everywhere where I was transitioned to, from Miami to Oklahoma to detention centers in the greater Seattle area. And I spent that first year there thinking that's what prison was like. Then it wasn't, and then I made a lot of really bad decisions. I went to trial even though I knew I was guilty. I perjured myself on the witness stand and said I didn't do it. And it was after a jury convicted me that an officer brought me a book. And it's funny, I was just writing about that today. He brought me a series of books on, that really just changed the way I think. And that happened before I got to the penitentiary. So that was a very big shift for me. And it influenced every decision I made while I was in prison. And I know that we all get that, get knowledge about how to live within the system at different stages and at different times. But that's how it happened for me. So by the time I got to a penitentiary, it was a very violent prison, but I didn't know anything different. And it was, although people complained a lot about prison, for me, it was different because I'd served a year in solitary. And so when you serve a year in solitary and you get to, any kind of prison that's open, you start to feel a sense of, there's opportunities here. And I, there's a big wall that went around the prison, but what I could see was the blue sky ahead. And that always gave me hope. And I still remember having that hope. And that hope has never left me. So for me, it started at the very beginning. Yeah, I see that we have quite a few people popping in here, and I don't recognize a lot of the names. So let me introduce myself, and then I'd like to walk through today kind of what, I didn't have a lot of, I don't need a lot of preparation because prisons really was my life. My name is Michael Santos, and I wanted to, I want to thank all of you for being a member of our community. Most of you know my partner, Justin, or other people who work in our community. I don't typically work with individuals. My effort is more on a macro scale to try and change the system. And I lead a nonprofit, which I hope some of you will use. One of the things that I always tell people is anything that people buy from us, or if they buy consulting or anything from White Collar, it's all free on prisonprofessors.org. Everything is free. And it's free because we have two different missions, okay? We have two different missions. My mission is to try and introduce systemic change to the Bureau of Prisons, including work release programs and opportunities to earn freedom through merit. And that is not something that has been possible all the way through, but I'm very optimistic. I'm always optimistic that there's more opportunities in the future than in the past. And I want to share some news that kind of comes out that we could look at today to kind of see why do I say that? Okay. And it's important to put context here in place. because I went into the prison system when there was a different sentencing system in place. At that time, we had what was called an indeterminate sentencing system, where a judge imposes a sentence, but later there is another body called, at that time it was the U.S. Parole Commission, that could assess whether continued incarceration is necessary. That changed in 1987 for anybody convicted of a crime after November the 1st, 1987. And when that changed, we switched to what's called the determinative sentencing system, which everybody, I imagine, on this webinar has more familiarity with indeterminate sentencing, where a judge imposes a term. You could earn a modicum of earned time credits. Well, at that time it was called statutory good time. Now some people have earned time credits, but it was a long arc to get that transition from November the 1st, 1987 to in the beginning, guidelines were mandatory. It took 12 or 15 years before a Supreme Court case made them advisory, which is why it's so important for every person facing a sentencing hearing to be thinking about, how am I going to influence the sentencing hearing, hopefully, but also different aspects going forward. Then there was some other legislation that took place, including the Second Chance Act I think that was 2008, and then the First Step Act, which is the biggest piece of prison reform legislation in the last 40 years or so. So a lot has changed, but I will say, during the time that Justin was in prison or that I was in prison, there was no concept of earned time credits or any possibility of working to influence an earlier release date. In fact, there was massive resistance from the Bureau of Prisons who would say, why should we reward anybody for doing what they're supposed to be doing? So the system, you've got to celebrate these victories, and it doesn't apply to everybody right now. And there are some limitations on it to how much time people get. But I have a different perspective because of that length of time that I served, and because I saw so many different reform movements over the multiple decades that I was in prison. And now I'm very bullish and optimistic that we will see more changes in the future. And I believe that we'll see more changes in the future. And I don't want to get political, because I know people have very polarizing views in politics, but it was this president who passed the First Step Act, number one. And number two, it was this president that has gone through quite a few different stages of the judicial system and is a very big critic of it. In fact, I'm going to share my screen right here. I want to share my screen because I want to just share some news that to me, if I were in prison, I would have found optimism in this news. And it's this news right here that was just on CNBC last week. It says, Trump says 5 more law firms will provide $600 million total in free legal work for causes he supports. And if you scroll down this page, right? If you scroll down this page, he's talking about what are the causes that he supports? So the pro bono services will be directed toward causes that both Trump and the firm support, including assisting veterans, combating anti-Semitism, and ensuring, this is a big one, fairness in the justice system. And I know a lot of you feel as though you haven't had fairness in the justice system. There's another section here, which is very important to me. All the firms agreed to emerge in illegal discrimination and preferences and commit to merit-based hiring. That's a big thing in this administration, merit-based, okay? Merit-based, what does that mean, right? It's the big thing that I try and change. I wish I had a book around here, but I don't. If you're not familiar with Earning Freedom, Conquering a 45-year prison sentence, you'll know that's what I've been writing about since even before I got out of prison. This concept of merit, of demonstrating or creating a mechanism that will incentivize a pursuit of excellence, right? Incentivize people to work toward the best possible outcome. That's not a strategy that has existed in the federal prison system since prior to 1987, right? Prior to 1987, let's just say a person went to prison with 10 years, okay? In 10 years, after the person served 3 years, he'd be incentivized, do really well with your time, get an education. If you've already got an education, use your education to contribute to society, do something of merit, and then a body would look at you and assess whether continued incarceration is still viable, if it's still good, because maybe it's better that you serve that time at home. So because of these changes, I'm very optimistic that we'll see changes like that in the during this term. You see other things that have happened this term. There's been the appointment of a new, what's called a pardon czar. And who is the person that's the new pardon czar? Well, it's a woman who was once serving 20 years in federal prison. And Trump pardoned her during his first term, and she's been an advocate. Her name is Alice Walker, and she is now the one that is assessing whether executive clemency is appropriate, or at least she has a voice, okay? These are things that were unheard of when I was in prison. And just as it was unheard of to think of a concept that somebody could go to prison with a 5-year sentence and potentially, with all the things working out right, might get out in 2 years or less, right? I'm very optimistic that we will see additional changes in the months and years to come. But it's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be a blanket. I think it's going to require people to work toward building a story, a personal story showing what have you done? Why are you worthy? And to put that into concept, because everybody wants to get out early, everybody, okay? But you've got to think about the stakeholders that you meet in the prison system, right? Those stakeholders, they work for the executive branch of government, the Department of Justice. And they are not so interested in what you think or what your family thinks or what I think, right? They're way more concerned about what did a federal judge say. And a federal judge said, I sentenced you to 5 years. There are some people that would like to see no good time, right? They want you to serve everything. So it's super important to look at the tea leaves, but then also look at yourself and say, what am I doing? In what way, what am I doing to advance myself as a candidate for the highest level of liberty at the soonest possible time? And for me, as somebody who went through the journey, I would say it doesn't matter if you're making this assessment before you get sentenced or after you've been sentenced and you're getting ready to go to prison, or if you're in prison. You've always got to be asking yourself, what am I doing to advance me as a candidate for the earliest possible release date? And how are you building support? There in this administration, well, I'd like to spend a little time talking about this whole concept of what exists, what mechanisms exist, right? And there are some that are, most people would think about judicial relief, which comes through a direct appeal or potentially through habeas corpus or something along those lines. But that's only one mechanism. There are other mechanisms that you need to be thinking about, or at least I was always thinking about while I was going through prison, and that would include executive clemency. Under this administration, there's not a big concern for the process that has existed forever. And anybody can see that process. In fact, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen because I want you to see it. Anybody can find this work, and I write a lot about it on our website. But if anybody just goes to justice.gov, and if you type in there probably executive clemency, and see what it says. Well, let's just see. Let's try to decide. Executive clemency. Let's see what the DOJ, where the DOJ is. DOJ, legal authority governing executive clemency. This is for people in federal prison. Anybody could read this information and get all kinds of information on how to do this. Who's eligible? How do you prepare? What should you do? And I would encourage people, if you're going into the system or if you have a loved one going into the system, think about this very, very early. Think about, well, how does it work? I wrote an article about this not too long ago where I interviewed a former pardon attorney, or rather staff attorney who worked in the U.S. Pardon Attorney's Office. And he talks about, well, how does it work? If you submit a clemency petition, what happens? So what the pardon attorney said during that podcast, and it's a 2-part podcast, I would encourage people to listen to it or watch it, and I'll show you where to find it. But he said the first thing that happens is they'll work with the FBI to start an investigation. And that investigation will go to the FBI that's tasked with the job, will interview people in the prison. They will interview people at the U.S. Attorney's Office that prosecuted you. They will interview the judge who sentenced you. And they will just try to, and if there are victims in the case, they will interview the victims. And they're just going to gather information like, do you oppose this person asking for clemency? Do you support this person that's asking for clemency? And ideally, if you're working on this path, you're going to have a strategy. And that strategy is going to be, well, you want to persuade people to not oppose your petition, actually you want people to support your petition, but if they won't support, at least not oppose. So if you're going to get somebody to do that, you've got to be thinking, well, what can I do today to build a better argument, to advance myself as a candidate? The more you think about this, the more work you might put into the initiative and into the effort. And I'm not going to say it's easy. Nothing's easy, right? Once you develop a number and you're in the system, nothing is easy. Everything is hard. And nobody can change the past. All we can do is work to change the future and change how other people view us and see us. And that requires work. That's not something I can do. It's the only person that can do that is you. I can show you the way, but you've got to be willing to do the work. And I'll give you an example of what that should look like by looking at this site right here. This is Melinda. She let me into this view. And you'll see, if you look at prisonprofessorstalent.com, this is free. I don't know, anybody in our community can open one of these, okay? But this is her journey of going through the system, where she would write a biography. I'm sharing my screen, yeah. She wrote a biography that describes who she is. If you don't do this and describe your story, your life story of who you are and what you're doing, the only record that's going to exist is going to be what the prosecutor says about you. And that's not going to be a very favorable picture. I would always advise somebody to anticipate that the prosecutor is going to say the only reason you're saying you're remorseful or sorry is because you got caught. But if you want to learn lessons on like how to write a biography, I think there's an original lesson. Yeah, if you just click there, there's a lesson that kind of describes, what are you thinking about? What should you be doing to cause the system, people in the system, to see you differently? And again, this isn't about Melinda. It's not about me. It's not about it's about you. How hard are you willing to work to make people see you as something different from what the government is saying about you? And so what did she do? Well, I'll say, I know that before she even surrendered to prison, and a lot of people have done this in our community, Scotty and Joseph and others who are also on this webinar. I just happen to have Melinda's up here, right? They worked really hard to memorialize all the things that they are doing. In fact, she started writing long before she even surrendered to prison, right? It's like showing a mindset. What am I doing here? What am I doing with my life? And all of this becomes an asset. It becomes an asset that you could use for self-advocacy. And that's what you have to be thinking about. I need assets to get very cynical people to believe in me. That's what merit-based means. I am working to get a higher level of liberty at the soonest possible time. Every time she read a book, she would write a book report. One of the things we like to teach about, she wrote a very comprehensive release plan. And this is a recent development where you would encourage people to leave a testimonial for who you are and what you've been doing. So anybody could build one of these. That then becomes an asset that I believe, it's what I always say, I'll never ask somebody to do something I didn't do. That's what I did while I was in prison, is I was always working to try and get stakeholders in the system to see me as something different. And I think that's what I'm hopeful that everybody in our community is learning how to do. How do you build this and develop this in light of the wretched system I'm going into? And this is not, my word. This is like everyday news coming out. This is the New Yorker. My wife just sent me this today. I haven't even read this article yet, but this is the prison system, right? Starved in jail. Why are incarcerated people dying from lack of food or water, even as private companies are paid millions for this per year, right? This, I would, based on the headline, I'm going to imagine that this is an expose of the private prison system. But the federal prison system is very different from when I went in. They've got a massive staffing problem. They've got budget problems. I mean, if you talk about closing down government agencies, I don't know a better agency to close down than the Bureau of Prisons. But that's just because I think that we commit really heinous violates human rights by keeping people in and blocking them from access to education, blocking them from access to prepare for success, blocking them from access to build a career, blocking them from access from maintaining really strong family ties. It is a wretched system. And that's why, Justin has his job in running white collar advice, and he sponsors the nonprofit because everything on the nonprofit is free. And I would encourage you to be looking at it right now. And I'll just kind of give you a little tour of it right now, because I want you to be able to see it and understand what we're doing. This is the new website where we're creating it with hopes of showing people, hey, I'm going to provide a tremendous amount of information here based on what I learned from going through prison. And you can find it like right here. If you go to the influences, you'll see when I say, I'm not asking you to do anything I didn't do. You can see how I'm building this to become an example. Okay. This is an example of what I talk about when I say, share everything that you're doing that's influencing you. So like it's right here under Founders page. If you go to influences, I'm trying to build a story. And I always use this story. Well, what was it in 1987 when I was locked inside of solitary that changed my life? If I click that, open that in a new tab, it'll open to an article where I'm describing, okay, what was it at that early stage? Earlier in this question, Rhonda asked me about, did I get started right away? Well, this is that story of that start right away. Or what were the family members suggesting that I do when I was going through those very difficult moments? And then who were the other influences along the way? Well, this is just an example. The question that I would ask, who are the people that are influencing you? What is causing you to change your life or to make others in the system see you as something different? And because I was in for so long, I write in annual kind of terms of these people that influenced me at different stages of the journey, from the 1980s through the 1990s. How did I bring these people into my life? And in what ways did I turn those people into becoming advocates for me? That would advocate to try and help me get a higher level of liberty at the earliest possible time. So I spent about, and I would encourage you, look through this website, because you should be able to find ideas that will prompt you to begin building your story, because my story is irrelevant to you. The only purpose of sharing it is that you see what could be possible. I served every day of my sentence. I didn't get out one day early, but that's because the law was different. The law changed when President Trump signed the First Step Act, and I'm very bullish that we're going to see changes in this administration. It's just that I don't think it's going to be a blanket change. I don't think it's going to be a change that applies to everybody. I think you had better have a merit-based system. And, you know, whether it's going to be applying for clemency, and there are mechanisms that make it a little bit easier, such as what happened with what I described earlier about Alice Walker being in charge of the partner, right? Just appointing her is only one step. There are other steps. Now they're going to have to make policies, and they're going to have to make a mechanism for people to apply. Don't wait until those policies come for you to start building a record that shows why you are a worthy candidate. And always remember that it's never too early and it's never too late to get started. But nobody has a right to any of this early release. When a federal judge imposes a sentence, it's only a federal judge that can change that sentence unless there is some type of administrative change. And I'm just very bullish that we'll see those kinds of administrative changes. I would just encourage you, don't sleep on that. Do whatever it is you need to do. So that's really what I wanted to share in the first half of this monologue or webinar. I think it's because I don't think it's about me. This is really about all of you. All of you are spending time to be here. I always say there's no question anybody can't ask me about the journey before prison, through prison, or after prison, or seek any type of, if there's any questions that I could respond, I want to respond to those questions. And I'm seeing some questions in the chat, but if somebody has a question and they want to just pipe in or unmute themselves, feel free to do that, and I will respond. In the interim, I'm going to read these questions. This first one from Michelle. It says, could you ask a guard or supervisor at Unicor for a character reference or positive changes they have seen? That is a great question. The answer, of course, is yes. You can ask. Unfortunately, there are policies in the Bureau of Prisons that will discourage, at least when I was in prison, that would discourage a person that works in the Bureau of Prisons to providing such a letter. In fact, I'll share this letter with you. Let me see if I can find it and I'll share it with you. But don't think of this as personal to you. Think of this as it's an example of the systemic problems in the Bureau of Prisons. Okay. Let me see if I can find this testimonial page. I want to show you. Here we go. Here I found it. So I'm going to find this testimonial, and I'm going to share my screen. So this testimonial here is from, he's now a director in the Bureau of Prisons, but at this time he was a warden. Notice the date. Is there no date? Oh, there's no date. But I was out of prison, as it says. I was in the audience when Santos made a luncheon keynote, right? This is like in 2016 or 15 or something. I got out of prison in 2013. And he wrote this testimonial that I put on my website. So I'm already out of prison. And when I put it on my website, I got a call from the general counsel of the Bureau of Prisons and said, well, the policy doesn't allow him to give you this testimony. I'm already out of prison. and they wanted me to take down this testimonial, which I did just because of my relationship with the agency. But while I was in prison, I asked a lot of people to give me testimonials as well. And they flat out told me the policy doesn't allow us. I would still ask, because there are some people that are more mavericks in the Bureau of Prisons, and they will say, I don't care, I'm going to give you the testimonial. And they might do it. So definitely ask, but understand the Bureau of Prisons historically has been against providing those kinds of validations. It is such a twisted agency that in some of my books, I wrote this story about a rule in the Bureau of Prisons. And one of those rules is concerning visiting. The rule holds that you're not allowed to visit anybody you didn't know prior to your time in prison. And which, for me, I was a Coke dealer when I was a kid. And, the only people I would have known would have been Coke dealers or so on. And so it would have been fine for those people to come and visit me. But after I'd been in prison for 10 years or so, I had a lot of very positive influences in my life. They were university professors and business leaders and so on. And the only way they could come and visit me is they'd have to check that I knew him before my incarceration. Well, one of these guys, his name was Sam Torres. He was a professor and he was a retired federal probation officer. And he said he used to disagree with me that some of the things that I'd write about the Bureau of Prisons, that they would never do that, and I said, great, fill out an application to come visit me. And he filled out the application in the traditional way, said, no, I didn't know him before he was in prison. He wrote a letter. I retired from federal probation. I mean, what better mentor could you have than a former probation officer to guide you? They blocked him from coming in, and he appealed it, and they blocked him all the way up. So that is the reality of prison. The reality of prison is you should expect obstacles at every level. And it's your job to figure out, how do I overcome them? So Michelle, I hope that answers your question. I know that it's not what you really wanted to hear, but it's the reality of the system. And I would say, let's figure out ways to build to succeed anyway. I did it. And I think your husband or whoever it is you're writing this about could do it as well. And that's the kind of thing that I will be putting on the blog at prisonprofessors.org. I'll be writing about this, giving ideas and suggestions on how I overcame those kinds of challenges. I'm now going to go to the next section because I don't see any hands up. But if anybody wants to raise a hand, please feel free. So are you saying that jail time isn't mandatory nowadays for nonviolent crimes? Also, you're saying that the new individual Trump appointed been to prison. I missed that early on. So Shante Buchanan, I'm speaking to you. Definitely, I am not saying that jail time isn't mandatory. If a judge imposes jail time, then jail's going to follow. What I said was, under the federal sentencing guidelines, when they first launched in 1987 for crimes committed after November the 1st, 1987, at that time, they were mandatory. The judge had to impose a sentence within the guideline range unless there were some special circumstances, which he would have to state in his statement of reasons. But there was a Supreme Court case that happened, I think it was in 2015, I think it was called Booker, that stated the sentencing guidelines are now advisory. They are not mandatory. And that's one of the reasons it makes so much sense for people to invest a lot of time and energy to develop a mitigation strategy before sentencing, because the judge can take that into consideration at sentencing, whereas before they couldn't. Also, you're saying that the new individual Trump appointed has been to prison. Yes, the new pardon czar, and you could look it up. In fact, if you want to see it, I'll just share it with you, right? It's very important for you to see how to do things. So let's share this screen right here. And I'm going to go to right here and go to pardon czar, the pardon czar. And you'll see it right. Who is Alice Johnson's, Trump's newly appointed pardon czar? Has been appointed a pardon czar by President Trump. She will recommend individuals for presidential commutations. This is her, who had her sentence commuted and was later pardoned during his first term as an inspiration to people. He commuted her sentence on 2018, and on 2020, he granted her a full pardon. Before her commutation, she had spent more than 20 years in federal prison for a first-time drug offense. So yes, the answer to that question is yes. She was in prison, and President Trump commuted her sentence, and now she has some influence on assessing who else is worthy of a commutation or a pardon. And when we're talking about executive clemency, it's important to understand the distinction between a pardon and a commutation. Probably not as relevant during this administration, because this administration is makes its own decisions. Historically, and if you look at the Justice website, a pardon is only considered after a person has completed a prison sentence and he's been out for 5 years. But there are many examples of President Trump pardoning people even while they're in prison and even before they surrendered to prison. So, but why did that happen? It happened because people were merit-based. They built a body of work that advanced them as a candidate. It's very hard to get the attention of the President of the United States. I'm not going to say it's impossible. Alice Walker did it. Ross Ulbricht did it. And you could do it, but don't think it's easy and don't think you're entitled. You've got to be prepared to build an amazing body of work and a big constituency that will get behind you. I'm going to respond to Nadine Reyes. Now, love the education. My only son is in federal prison, learning a lot. Nadine, I'm very sorry that your family is going through that. I know that my family went through it for 9,500 days, but I hope that you'll always believe that there's more opportunities in the future than in the past. And if you look at the .org site, you will see a tremendous amount of free resources that you could just print and put in the mail and send to him. If you have the ability to buy books, I would encourage you to buy our books because they're self-directed courses. But if you don't have the ability to buy books, just apply for a scholarship. And to the extent we have resources, we'll send them for free.
Okay.
Okay. So
Okay.
best of luck to you and your family. Where's your son? You're on mute. I don't hear you.
I say he's in Texas, and I live in New York.
Where is he in Texas? Which prison?
What's that? Beaumont?
Is he in the high security penitentiary or
yes,
the medium?
Yes. First time ever arrested. He's in the U.S. Yeah, maximum.
Yeah, it's a very tough prison. That's how I started. And you should be he should be getting resources to figure out how do I lower that security designation, because an enormous amount of stress comes off of a person as they move lower in security levels.
Yes. I wanted to ask another question. I just got word from him. The crime that he did, well, he didn't do it, but the person that did the crime, we just found out he's in the same unit with my son. And
what's the question?
Yeah, the question is, I think that's very, very bad. This guy, he committed the crime with my son was with him, but he committed the crime. My son getting ready to try to come home because he got to talk about it. And when he texted me, emailed me and told me that the killer is in the same unit with him, I didn't rest the whole weekend. The weekend I was, it's crazy. So I'm trying to figure out what do I do, but I got to wait to talk to him.
Yeah, these are systemic problems in the Bureau of Prisons, custody classifications. I don't know enough about your son's case, and I don't have the time today to learn about that. But I would encourage you to look through prisonprofessors.org. There's a lot of free information there. And if you have questions, I don't know if the site's yet built for you to ask a question and then I could respond. But on the nonprofit site, that's what I do is I respond to questions like that to try and help anybody that's looking for that kind of information. And I will write, if you look at tomorrow's blog, I'll write exactly about what you just said. Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
So let me turn to the next one here. And that is, do you foresee, this is from Shantae Buchanan. Do you foresee major white collar crime changes? That's a legislative question. So that means that, remember, there's 3 bodies of government in the United States. There's the judicial branch. That's the federal judges that assess whether something was carried out or not. There's the executive branch, which is in our case, it's the Bureau of Prisons that kind of carries out the law. And there's the legislative branch. When you ask if there was going to be major white collar crime changes, I don't know of any. I know of none. There's not going to be a constituency that says, let people convicted of white collar crimes off. My mission is to try and say, if you don't belong in prison, don't go to prison. It's a waste of human resources and it causes more harm than good. And I believe that there's a lot of data that exists today that didn't exist 10 years ago that shows the Bureau of Prisons can manage people in society just as well as they can in a prison. In fact, better. If you look at the results from COVID, where the Bureau of Prisons let out like 15,000 people much earlier, those people have a much lower recidivism rate and a much higher success level. So I do foresee those kinds of changes, not in terms of the charges for white collar crimes, but rather in terms of the sanction and how much time people serve in prison. At least that's my work. That's what the nonprofit stands to change. I'm going to, did somebody say something?
Melinda.
Hi, Melinda.
Hi. I'm just jumping in. There have been a lot of people asking about how to create a prison professor's talent profile and how to update and all those sorts of things.
Great. That's a great question. And let me share the screen because it should be, let me just share the screen because we're, you know, it's hard to communicate at scale and help everybody see. But in order for it to be, let me just see which one I'm looking at. Google Chrome. it's always difficult to find which window I'm sharing here. I think it's this one. I think it's that one. Yeah, it's this one. So let's look at this. You would go to Prison Professors Talent. Okay, it's right there. And the first thing I would encourage you to do, if you're thinking about building something or helping a loved one build something, I would encourage you to learn about the system. Learn about why did this exist, okay? So read about these different, like just click on these. So you can kind of learn what are we doing and why, right? This is where we're trying to get the Bureau of Prisons to change the way they manage their institutions. This is about like showing people what do you have to do to change yourself. What are some ways that this works, right? And so I like share that story. Then there is employment. How do we work to change employers and business leaders to open opportunities for people to leave prison and get into the job market? So this is a very big, heavy lift. To build a profile, I think you just click that little button right there. And if you click that little button, let's go back to it again to show you where it is. Go from the home section, right? Build your profile. Just click. So I just click on any right there in the upper right. Click that. There's a video. That's a 30-minute video where I really describe it and I share with you how to do it. Then if you've not done one before, just click this link. I'm going to open it here. Click that link. And then you could start filling in your information, your email, your first name, last name, where will you serve your sentence? What is your registration number? If you don't know it, just put NA, right? And this information here, our team will take that information to build something like Melinda has, okay? So then you'll have your name and your mailing address or whatever it is when you were in there. And you want to share this with as many people as possible because every time you add to your document, right, if they click that, then they will get notified when you're adding and you're showing how you're changing your life. So you want people subscribing to your newsletter so that they follow you and they become advocates for you. Remember that old statement that says, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. Make yourself heard. How do you do that? Well, and this is if you're free, right? If you're free, you click this one right here and it shows you, how do you add to it? And you could just add your information here. Does it go into your biography section, your journal entry section, your book report section, or a release plan? And then you just type the information or whatever it is you want to share, and that will go. Once you're in prison, if you're in prison, then obviously you don't have access to the internet. Hopefully you have access to core links. And if you have access to core links, there's an email that goes to members of our team. And when you send an email, members of our team grab it and they update your profile. That's how it works. So, we're building this machine. I think we have like 1,000 or 1,200 people that are on there right now, but we need to have like 10,000 people on there in order to change legislators' minds. So this is a project that that the nonprofit builds for anybody in our community. Anybody, you don't even have to be in our community. If you want to build one, build it. We need to show people who should not be in prison, and take those stories to the news and to DC and get people talking about it. We need to talk about why is a commitment to mass incarceration bad for America. And we need to show what will make it better. So that's my job. And so I would encourage you to build a profile, go through the site. If you're on this webinar and you don't know still, I know that there are members of our team that will help you. Scotty and Joseph and Melinda and others will help you. So the key is to recognize the value in what you're building, and that what you're trying to do is build support. That's my recommendation. So let me continue, and feel free, of course, to chime in if you have questions. I'll respond to any questions. Now I'm going to go to the next one. So Major White, I covered Shantae. Ashley, how can I create that for my husband who is being held pre-sentencing? Very easily, Ashley. Just go to prisonprofessors.org and prisonprofessorstalent.com, okay? And I'll have a link from .org, and I know that Justin will have a link as well. But the website is in fact, I'll type it right in here in this chat, prisonprofessorstalent.com. And I just plugged it in the chat so you could grab the link yourself. And it's free. So you would just go to it, and then you could use that to open a profile for anybody. And then you would be able to send it, since you're home, he could send it to you, and you could send it to our team, and they will populate the profile. Okay. Next is, do you see FSA time earned being offered to all federal? No, that's one of the big advocacy campaigns that we work toward, is to make it available to all, but also remove the limitation so that you don't only have 1 year, you have unlimited amount. It's in the best interest of society for people in prison to work toward earning freedom. And that's what I work toward every day, is to changing that. So you can read about that on prisonprofessors.org, and you can read about the work that the nonprofit does on that front. But it's a very heavy lift. I want you to know it's a very heavy lift to change federal laws. And my time horizon is a lot longer than yours. Everybody would love to see it happen today, but it takes time. So Ramita asks, can I carry talent professors for my loved one who is in jail? Well, yes, you can, and you should. But you should also do more than just creating a profile, okay? You should look at the .org and scroll through it and realize that the real value is building your story. You want to build your story of why you're a worthy candidate for relief. Don't wait for your attorney to be the only person that's advocating for you. It's super important for each person to learn how to self-advocate. Once you get into the Bureau of Prisons, you won't have an attorney advocating for you. It's going to become very important for you to learn how to do it yourself. And the earlier you start working, the better off you're going to be. I see Nadine Reyes again. If you live in New York and prison is in Texas and the judge stated that he does this time close to home. Well, there's a mechanism for that, Nadine, but it's also a fight. And I started like your son. I was from Seattle. My family was in Seattle. And they shipped me to a high security penitentiary on the East Coast. And it took me 17 years on the East Coast before I could move closer west. The Bureau of Prisons is not a very family-friendly organization, okay? What's important is you realize you've got to become a very effective self-advocate. But I would encourage you, Nadine, to look at prisonprofessorstalent.com and look at some of these people, because this is going to give you hope, okay? Look at some of these people here, okay? This is the talent site right here. If your son is in Beaumont, have him look at all these three people. You look at these three people. He was serving double life. He was serving 213 years. He was serving double life. All of these people are home right now and leading very successful lives. Okay. And you should read their stories and see, how did that happen? What did they do?
God.
Okay. Because you need hope and your son needs hope. Okay. But the prison system is
Mhm.
is designed to
Yes, I have to
obliterate hope.
think.
What's that?
Mhm.
Okay. So anyway, I would encourage you to look through there and then build a campaign. And I will write also about coordinating transfers and what can you do to build support for that transfer. Also, there's a lot more in your favor today than existed when I was in prison. But you've got to know how to pull the levers, and you can do it yourself, and he can do it. You don't need to hire anybody for that. You just need to. Somebody's got to do the work, and that work is not filling out a form and waiting for success. It's ongoing work. Let me go to Michelle. My husband's case manager is going to move his case from New York to Utah. Then we expect to have a home inspection. How in-depth is that inspection? As long as you're not living in a crime-ridden neighborhood and running a crack house, you're going to be fine. Okay? They're just looking to make sure you're not a criminal organization. Is there any advice on how to prepare for this? Yeah, just be a good person. Be kind. Recognize that as long as you have a safe environment, no weapons, firearms in the house, and you talk about how you're there to support, that's all that it's going to take. Okay, we just had a major septic issue last week. We had a new drain field put in, wallboard in the basement. This mess, will lack of wallboard. No, that will not matter. The main thing they're looking for is this a criminal enterprise? Okay, sadly, a lot of people live in crime-ridden areas, and probation doesn't want people coming out of prison to have that that complication. So as long as it's not a criminal house and it doesn't look like it, and there are no weapons in the house, and you're letting them know that you're there to support, I think you should let some of the anxiety go and don't build a nightmare in your head. I'm sure you're going to be fine. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah.
Does it matter that I have 17 children and homeschool and run a homestead? And
as long as it's not a crime, I think it's great. And as long as your husband doesn't have a crime that prevents him from being around children, okay?
No, he does not.
Okay, then that's fine. I had 46 letters of reference that went to the judge before sentencing hearing. The judge said at sentencing that he reduced the sentence from 120. Yeah, don't worry about it. As long as it's a normal house, and it's fine. Okay. Mona, I requested long back to get a profile on prison professors, but was told that my request would be reviewed. I don't know who said that. At one such webinar, I was told was due to some mistake by an intern. Okay, that could be an intern that didn't know. Okay, but still have yet to hear back. Mona, send, let's see. Send it at prisonprofessors.org. I just put an email in there. Write a letter to where I just plugged it in there, roman@prisonprofessors.org. That'll go directly to the guy who oversees it all. And it should be, I don't know. We don't do any editing or anything like that. So anybody who submits, we want as many people as possible. There should have been that's probably a mistake by an intern, but I don't know who that intern was. But right, if you send it to that person I sent you on the bottom, or if you go through that process that I just showed you, that will also go directly to him. Okay, David, would all this apply to state level white collar charges as well? Well, so that's a great question, David. You see, in the United States, we actually have 53 different criminal justice systems. Every state has its own system. The military has a system. The federal, DC has a system, and the federal government has a system. That's 53 different systems, and they all have their rules, okay? I believe that every person should be building a self-advocacy campaign and building assets to support that self-advocacy campaign. I've never been in the state prison system, but I do know that any place there are human beings, and bureaucrats, it's always going to be the person who can advocate for himself best that will get the best relief. So I would say yes, but I'm not, would not claim to have expertise in the state of Florida's prison system. Michelle, have you heard of anything about Trump sending people to longer home confinement to reduce cost? I have not heard about that, but I definitely know a lot. It's not going to be Trump, right? Trump's the president. He's looking at tariffs and country deals. He doesn't give a crap about people in prison. But he is disrupting the system and the way it's done. And there is a new attorney general, Pam Biondi, who has made a statement. She wants to carry out the First Step Act. You also have a brand new director of the Bureau of Prisons who just got appointed last Friday, who is pledged to carry out the spirit of the First Step Act. So there's a lot of things that are happening, but it is a massive bureaucracy with a massive union. And I think everybody should expect a lot of obstruction from the union. But this president is not going to be one that tolerates a lot of that. So I would look to see rapid change. When I say rapid, I mean rapid in terms of federal government change. So not this afternoon, but during this term. And I do see more people getting out of prison because it's a waste of human resources and financial resources. So yes, I think that more people will get out and have longer terms. Thank you for sharing your story. Heard your audiobook a few days ago and gave me a lot of hope. I'm glad to hear that, David. I would encourage you to look through all of the books that are available on prisonprofessors.org. There's a lot. I can't cram 26 years of being in prison and 12 years of being out into one book. There are a lot of self-directed efforts that each individual should pursue to work toward a better life. Jana, inmates. I would encourage all of you to stop using that word inmates. That's a prison term, right? You're an American and you're a citizen and you're a man or you're a woman, you're a father, you're a daughter, you're a husband, you're a son, right? I hate the word inmate and you'll never hear me use it. I think you're all people and the system likes to degrade you into saying you're an inmate. I frequently tell this story of how when they used to tell me in prison, counselors say, are you an inmate or a convict? And I said, I'm an American, and that's what all of you are. You're all people. And don't let the system change you into something you're not. Nobody's an inmate. You're in a wretched system that is the worst system agency in the United States. And we're to work to change it. Do not have access to the internet. Yes, they don't. I wish there was a way my son could hear you speak and see your videos. It would make such a difference. I do go into prisons a lot and to give this information. And I will continue to do so. But even though he may not be able to see the videos or listen to me, I would really encourage you to give him the books and the courses, self-directed. I had to learn when I was in solitary confinement. I just learned from Mandela and Viktor Frankl and Gandhi, and all those people helped me. And all I am doing, there's nothing unique I'm giving you. I'm only sharing with you the lessons that I learned from great leaders. I wish they were mine. I just learned from leaders. And that's what I want to share with your son. No, a personal narrative, is Melinda's biography the same as a personal narrative? I would say no. These are very different documents, okay? Your profile, think in terms of audiences, okay? You've got to always be thinking about your audience. And your audience is big, okay? But they're at different stages, okay? When you're going through the judicial process, you should really be thinking about an audience of one. That's the federal judge. Because that judge, and to an extent, the probation officer who's writing the pre-sentence investigation report, that messaging that you want to give to that person may be very different from what you put on your profile, because there are different stages in the system. The first stage is going to be, to get the lowest possible charge, okay? So even before you're charged, there's an advocacy campaign that should start there, okay? But I might not reach you before you're charged. Then there's an advocacy campaign on, if you're convicted, how do you influence the pre-sentence investigation report? And that's going to be different as well, because that's going to differ depending on whether you're going to appeal or whether you pleaded guilty and you need to build an argument or a body of work that will advance you as a candidate for the lowest possible sentence. Then there is the sentencing hearing. And you obviously want to get the lowest possible sentence. It doesn't matter if you get 1 year or 3 years or 10 years, whatever you get, you're going to want to build a campaign to get out earlier. Your sentencing narrative is designed for that specific era. And there's a ton of free information on .org. Of course, Joseph and Melinda and everybody on our team would be able to help you individually, but that's one-on-one. If you want to learn yourself, spend time. It's like kind of I would argue it's kind of like being a doctor and operating on yourself. You probably want to talk and interact with somebody who knows, but a narrative, I would say, is different than a profile. A profile, you are trying to build the next stage of your life. You're trying to influence a very cynical case manager. You're trying to influence a cynical probation officer. You're going to try and influence the judge to let you off of early termination. You're going to try and influence an employer or a business partner in the future. And all of this should be iterative. You should build a body of assets and work that will always continue to advance you for something better in the future. Somehow I see, it looks like, okay, so no, they are different. Oh, somebody wrote that. All right, I didn't see that part. But yes, I think they're different. Steve Luke, thank you. Thank you. Can you share how to navigate to the place where your members are able to write on the PP site their story? So remember, we're just a small nonprofit, okay? We're not a major organization that has a major staff. I'm the funder, Justin's a funder, and then we are very fortunate to have a lot of other people that believe in the mission that fund us, but we don't have a huge staff. So the type of site that you're talking about would be like a Facebook, and that would cost millions of dollars to build that type of program where I could give you a user ID and password and say, hey, go create user-generated content on there. We try to do this in the most efficient way possible. And that would mean send it to our team because we've got a dedicated team that can do it. And that was one way, when we were building this, the motivation was to give the platform for anybody. But the danger is that, you have to make a case. Well, do I invest hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a IT engineer and a process to build that? Or can we build it? Well, we'll just manage it. And I hire interns or volunteers that come on and help. And all of this is really done offshore. So if you're looking to do this, and if you're home and you're trying to build your profile, I put in the chat, Roman@prisonprofessors.org. All you have to do is send it to him. Or better yet, go into that form that I showed you on prisonprofessors.org and just click on there because there's two options. One option is click to start building. One is to add to your profile. And that's right here. So it's right here. So like, if this is the site, this is a video, it's 30 minutes where I kind of walked it through for people. And then there's two buttons. If you haven't built a profile before, click it right here to get it started. And then every time you're going to add, just click it right here. So if you're on your way to prison and you want to keep this thing updated, you should be able to send it from prison directly through the email system. If you have any complications or you want to make it easier on us, send it to your family and have them type it and just send an email to roman@prisonprofessors.org and our team will publish it. So that's how you do it.
Michael.
Next.
It's Melinda, sorry. In the messages, Ashley asked a question I was hoping you might be able to address at 453 related to writing the U.S. Marshals. Do you see that?
Are you asking me a question?
So she's asking you a question. I have been writing the U.S. Marshals regarding my husband's health issues. Is that frowned upon? His blood pressure keeps dropping, et cetera, et cetera. What's your opinion on whether or not she should be doing that?
I would encourage you to be a great self-advocate. I was very fortunate to have a great self-advocate first with my sister. And then when Carol came into my life, nobody was better than Carol in advancing that for me. And she was successful in getting me a lot of relief while I was in prison, but it was because she was relentless in doing exactly what you're doing. Writing letters to the region, writing letters to the bureau, calling the phone, and we overcame a lot of complications because of that advocacy. So I would encourage you to do it.
Yeah, I do it. Excuse me. That's what I do. I wrote the region. It's so many emails. Was my son been to different prisons?
Nadine, don't only do that.
Yeah.
Go to the website that shows who is the congressperson, the members of Congress.
What I'm going to say. That's what
Ask them, and then ask them to write a letter, because the Bureau of Prisons is very responsive to members of Congress. They might not be so responsive to a concerned mother. Okay.
Right.
So the more you
That's
can build, the better off you're going to be. But it's never easy. You're fighting a very entrenched bureaucracy with a lot of people that want to keep it as it exists. Your job is to get the best outcome for your loved one, and I would never stop. Okay? So let's go on down here again to my husband spent 3 years on the opposite coast as myself after 17 children, his parents. Yes, I know it's very tough. You know, he's only 12 hours away, and it's amazing. 12 hours is still a very long time. Yeah. Okay. So the case manager has agreed to look at the release plan that you helped us write. Okay, we are hoping that I get, okay, good. That's fantastic news. Do you know anything about the new director of the BOP? He's from West Virginia. That's all I know, because there's been very little written about him, the new director. He is out of West Virginia. That's all I've read. It's not even yet on the BOP's website. Does one need to disclose, or wasn't as of this morning, does one need to disclose any trusts and financials? Does government go after them? I would always be expectant that the federal government has gotten so entrenched in people's lives, and I'm very much opposed to it. But I would never lie, because lying on any government form is a federal crime. So if you have things and you have to disclose them, just disclose them in a manner that is truthful. If somebody has ownership or access to a trust, then you've got to disclose it, because otherwise you're committing a federal crime. And there's besides it being a felony, it exposes somebody to prison. Now, I'll give you some examples though. If the person doesn't have access to the resources, then he doesn't have access to the resources. When I was in prison, I made money in prison from publishing. And I wrote a lot about this. How did I do it? When I spoke with the captain about what I wanted to do, and he said I couldn't control finances from when I was in prison, but after a lot of back and forth, and it'll take me too long to describe it today, but I will say, he said I could give power of attorney to at the time it was my sister, and then because I gave power of attorney to my sister, I didn't have control over. Actually, I didn't even have control over it. She had control of it. And because of that, he said, okay, because I said she could run away with the money and I have no recourse. And because of that, I was able to continue doing the business that I was doing. And that time it was trading stocks. But I would encourage you to not lie, because a lie on any federal government form can result in prosecution. So it's very important to understand that. So trusts and financials, if the loved one has access, then you've got to disclose them. On the flip side, if he doesn't have access to the trust, but you do, you're not obligation to disclose anything to the government. You're not a criminal. You're not, have those problems. So just be truthful. That's all. But give as little as you possibly can. But the government, I would always expect the government to go after anybody who lies. Who in Congress? Jana G. I presume you're asking who in Congress. Wherever you live, you have a state representative that serves you in Washington, D.C., and that's somebody that you would write to. And you also have senators from your state. So you could write to all of those people and ask for help. What is the fastest way to reach our local Congress representative for a letter of reference? Is that recommended? Well, a letter of reference, I mean, if the congressman doesn't know your person, I wouldn't ask them for a letter of reference, because he's not going to give you one. He doesn't have the foundation to provide a letter of reference. The reason that you would reach out to Congress is if the Bureau of Prisons is violating your civil rights, which it does every day. ask a member of Congress to intervene and just send a letter to the Bureau of Prisons saying, I'm writing on behalf of my constituent whose husband is in Beaumont and he's being denied access to visiting, and I'd like you to tell me why. Okay, and then the Bureau of Prisons is going to look into it, and that's how you get a resolution. What is the fastest way to reach it? I would love to volunteer and give back. I'll find out how to get to it. Although longer letter of service, is that recommended if we tell our story? Wait a second, let me read that again. What is the fastest way to reach our local Congress representative? I think by letter, but I wouldn't ask for a reference. Is that recommended if we tell our story? I mean, certainly always try to tell your story. You know, if you want to get a recommendation from a member of Congress, you'd better build something that's going to be in the interest of the congressman, because politicians, they want something in return for anything they do. And they want your vote. Okay, so you want to talk, but you can't vote if you're a felon. So you've got to think about these kinds of stories. A great example is Ross Ulbricht. He was serving a double life sentence until last January, and Trump gave him a full pardon while he was serving a double life sentence. Why? It's because Ross Ulbricht had a 12-year history of building a massive constituency that advocated on his behalf. That's what you've got to be doing. You've got to build that constituency, and that's not going to happen by accident. It's not going to happen by happy talk. You got to want liberty, and you got to do everything in your power to build a case. And then last one here, I would love to volunteer and give back. Great. I think it's important for everybody to do that. Rhonda Devereaux, my son likes to help the new guys coming in minimum prison. He tells them about the books I've sent to him for you, Justin. He met someone that said you all helped him pre-sentence, and now he's helped my son. Well, I'm very happy to hear all of that. And I want to thank all of you for giving me your attention. I went through all the questions. I've shared a lot with you, but I would really encourage you to work with our team. Melinda and Joseph and Scotty and Justin are all real advocates trying to change the system. They've gone through it themselves, but nobody should work harder than you to get a higher level of liberty. And I really hope that you find a path to a better life. And I would encourage you to visit the .org site. It's still being developed. It's been a long track getting it to where it is, but I think it'll be done by the weekend. And I've got to get back to working on that right now. So I'm going to sign off and wish all of you the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Melinda.
Bye. Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Thank you so
you.
much.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.